ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei IPDA edition, where we talk about things that are relevant to the International Public Debate Association. I have with me my partner in crime, Tim Seavey. Feels like we've been cleaning up crime scenes all last week. So
it never stops. The crime scenes just keep on bleeding.
Yes. So troubleshooting the perils of running a website. So we love to take IPDA on in a number of different ways, and one way is where we kind of do a slowed down simulation of a topic selection. And so rather than doing 30 minutes of prep, it's 30 minutes of topic selection, just to kind of let everyone know what's going through our heads when we're doing these topic selections. Maybe, hopefully, it is helpful for the way that you see things. But of course,
it's also a mini deep dive into each topic.
Yeah, it's a mini dive. Yeah, so a shallow dive.
Shallow dive.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. And the way that we do this is that we flip for sides. Okay. And so I have a coin flip simulator here, and I believe that what we would do is, if it's heads, Tim is affirmative. If it is tails, Tim is negative. Right.
Yep.
Right. And so, and that determines who strikes first and the strategy that you're going for and all that stuff. All right. So here we go. Flipping it. I'm trying to use different simulators. Yeah. Heads, you're affirmative. Right. All right. Cool. So now
first streak.
Negative strikes first in IPDA. So if I'm on the negative, so I read these. But this episode, I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. I didn't look anything up. I saw them 10 minutes ago, but I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna kind of treat it this way. Okay.
And so these topics also reference are from the 2024 PSCFA warm-up round 3.
Okay.
So PSCFA warm-up just happened. Sounded like it was a good time. Here are the topics.
From developing nations. Okay. Ooh.
While Jared decides, I thought these were pretty good topics, but there's actually some wording issues that made me change my decision of like how I would organize my preference.
Yeah. Okay. So this first one is specifically because I am on the negative. All right. And so when you're on the negative, in my opinion, the more vague something is worded, the more latitude the affirmative gets. At least that's been my right. And so in defining terms and outlining the debate, so in my experience, a resolution like "this house believes that online love does more harm than good," the vagueness and the ambiguity of like the term or the phrase "online love" raises concern for me, because is that going to be about sex trafficking? I don't think I have any good don't fight sex trafficking online arguments. You know what I mean? And so, but it's the unpredictability overall, right? That that I'm trying to avoid that from. But I'm wondering, I don't know, if you were on the like you are on the affirmative, but if this happened to be the topic, like what topics are jumping to mind?
So theoretically, in IPDA, when it is a metaphor round or like a very wildly interpretable resolution, it does kind of behoove the affirmative side. It's a little bit of their obligation to tell the negative, like, here's what we're going to do, so as not to waste the negative side's 30 minutes of prep. I don't believe there's any like actual hard written rule about that, but it is considered more of like the cultural standard in IPDA not to be intentionally squirrely and try and like, wreck negative's prep time by doing something weird. So I would define it. I think the more like predictable topic here would be dating apps.
Yeah, I was thinking
how I would define online love. And I know, I guess dating apps in a broader sense, so that would also include things like, Cupid.com and Match.com, like some of the older things, like before it made it to an app when it was still just a website. So I would say like online dating tools do more harm than good. I think that's a fun debate, and I would imagine framers' intent, that's probably where they were going for. And there's, I think, really meaty evidence on both sides of like, I think that was something that a bunch of my classmates at Chapman, like publishing as their senior theses and like submitting to NCA was, does Tinder make people more lonely? And their evidence tended to say yes. And I think it was like the overwhelming number of options tends to make someone feel like there's this like plethora of ways that they can go out there, and then the also like speed and frequency of rejection is just like not what our psyche is built for. So that gets to be kind of challenging. On the negative side, I think you can also say that like it broadens the pool and like makes dating accessible to folks that otherwise would be excluded from it. The like people that are not going to your typical bar scenes and coffee shops and stuff. Like busier people, it allows you to be more like picky and selective. It is maybe like open to more like non-traditional relationships and inclusive of folks that have been otherwise cut out of or like feel at risk by putting themselves out there in a traditional dating sense. So I think
there's a lot of the ones where like the where the gender roles are sort of reimagined about who approaches who and who initiates it, and I think that though like I'd be interested in at least discussing that or looking into it, because I've been married 20 years, so I have zero experience with dating apps. Like I think my marriage is older than the vast majority of them. So yeah.
I don't know. On part of the internet. Okay. Yeah. But so that's a topic that would have been the first one that I would strike actually from affirmative or negative anyways, because I also don't really love like metaphor rounds.
Even on the affirmative. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, next, I just strike this one because I'm on the affirmative, and I do not want to have to argue this.
Okay.
The United Nations should outlaw the extraction and trade of rare earth minerals from developing nations. I think that this is an interesting, cool topic, but I don't want to be on the affirmative side of it, because I think as soon as one, like your actor being the United Nations comes into play, you have no enforceability. There is virtually nothing the United Nations can do to actually make someone do other things. Like the UN can't really sanction. It just uses the Security Council sometimes to try and like push things around. It can have like initiatives and wants and desires, but there's very little enforceability. But two, is still coming to be punitive of developing nations. And that is a really like hard thing. Like I think you get into really just what is the worst of two evils, and I don't like those debates in general.
The the reason I did not strike that first, should outlaw the extraction and trade of rare earth minerals. Right, it's basically you are. I knew that you have those arguments on the negative side, that this kind of seems to be a punishment of sorts. You know what I mean? And so I'm like,
only punitive, but especially when you're talking like developing nations, when there may not be a significant economic alternative. It's like, all right, your options are work in a lithium mine or abject poverty. Like those are your two options. And it's like, we vote abject poverty because it doesn't hurt other people as much. Like, it feels like which one is worse and not which one actually has some benefit to it.
Yeah. And I'm also unfamiliar with any time the United Nations has outlawed the extraction of anything. Like, how do they even have a mechanism for enforcing this? I mean, what if somebody just says, yeah, whatever, and they just go ahead and do it? The
UN has outlawed all kinds of like war practices, but the International Criminal Council doesn't really have a whole ton of teeth to like arrest, convict, and then incarcerate people. Like there just doesn't exist a whole ton of like teeth to that. I don't think that's the UN really has enough there. So I think it's more so like a body for setting initiatives and wants, not so much like penalizing and upholding policy. So I think for that reason,
I mean, like in addition to like just not being able to do it, is like using that sort of symbolic gesture as a way to identify developing nations when like climate change is happening in developed nations, or that's where like the demand and the like pollution is happening, right? And so I guess I'm wondering who the developing nations are. I'm assuming that China's not on that list.
Yeah, so I think rare earth minerals, particularly, I think they're talking about like the Congo, I want to say, is where like a huge source of our aluminum comes from. It's like aluminum mines in parts of like Central Africa. are some of like the worst polluting and like worst human rights abusing and like worst, sources of things. So like, I think I would just make the immediate argument, like rob from the poor and give to the rich, because like there exist, I think, cleaner aluminum mines in very wealthy nations, but like it doesn't feel like anyone necessarily wins. Like you can try and make like a broader climate argument, but I don't think you end up getting far.
Aluminum is a rare earth mineral? I thought it was like lithium and cobalt. Or
I think it's just like rare earth isn't a periodic note. I want to say it just refers to its abundance.
Okay.
I believe. So I may be wrong on that, but sure, like we can, take anything like tungsten or whatever. And as I understand, like there are only a few places those things tend to be mined, and they tend to be mined in like very impoverished nations. So I would have to do a little bit more research on that. But I think in general, as soon as something is only being outlawed from developing nations, there needs to be some kind of alternative in order to make the story a little bit better. And I don't want to tell the story. It's like, sweet, we took a bad thing off the table that was at least giving some money to a developing country. Yes, it's bad, but I don't think you're ever going to like win the narrative of that debate.
And the supply side policies, I think, have inherent problems with them anyways. You know what I mean? It's like without dealing with demand side stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So that is struck. Your turn.
Okay. I think I'm going to be strategic about this one. This is an interesting place to be. Ooh.
I actually like all three remaining topics, so I'm
not.
Cool.
They're not bad. They're not bad. But I had a second guess after I reread the first one. Yeah. Okay. I think I'll do that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, getting rid of that one. Yeah, and so I think, I don't know, I'd like to be on the affirmative of that one. They've already done it. Yeah. So I think the sort of positions I'd have to take are not unwinnable. They're just not enjoyable.
Yeah. Make it a bigger blood sport. Like it's all for entertainment value anyways. Tradition for tradition's sake. Like I don't really have a ton of very inventive arguments on the negative of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's I wouldn't mind having, if I was forced into a debate, I think I'd focus on frank discussions about sports and risk, because all sports have risk, right? And it's like, and so is the goal to eliminate all risk? I think that, and so you could get a little bit more sort of philosophical about it, and I think that would be an interesting debate to have. I mean, I think that's the only place it would really, especially help off and I don't know, maybe some alterations to the kickoff rather than just elimination might be,
So that was I think it's inherent because of that. So this year the NFL changed the rules of the kickoff, so it's now called a dynamic kickoff. In preparation, I did a bunch of research into it, and Madden, the football game by EA Sports of all people, actually like partnered with the NFL to create a like visual representation of what the new kickoff rules are.
Wow!
So you can watch in the video game. It's pretty cool because they had to like redevelop a bunch of the game last minute to incorporate this new rule because they like care about how representative it is. So the new kickoff rule, it is still a kickoff, but it just creates a greater incentive and like it moves players forward so they don't have quite as much momentum by the time they make impact and things. It's an interesting change, but it certainly doesn't eliminate the kickoff. Fun little factoid though, the brief period of time that a minor league football division was created, so there existed a minor league football league for like a couple of weeks, and I bought season tickets to the San Diego team that created it.
Yeah.
And because they were minor league, they did not have kickoffs. They knew that is like far away the most injury laden play in the game.
Absolutely.
So it just started with the team on the 20. Like after changeover of possession, the team, if it's after a score or safety or anything, they just get it from the 20-yard line, and that was how it went. So as to prevent those like, all right, two of the biggest dudes in the world run at each other as fast as you can from 80 yards away, and that just car accident of human to human contact, kind of rough. So
it's all kicking team players other than the kicker will line up with 1 foot on the receiving team's 40-yard line.
Yeah, so basically the defense, so the team that's kicking off, lines up way closer, and so they have less momentum basically by the time they get there.
Right.
And also it disincentivizes kicking it like over, because 2023 apparently had the fewest and shortest kickoff returns, and also like most injuries of any season, because like kickers were just going into the end zone, and so now it moves it up. So like if you kick out of bounds, a touchback is now from the 40 instead of the 20. If you kick it through the end zone, it's from the 30 instead, or if it's a touchback, it's from the 30-yard line instead of the 20. So basically just makes it easier on the receiving team. So they want you to kick it within the goal line to 20 yards. And at that point in time, it triggers it, but there's like timing things delayed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think knowing that rule now gives me a little bit more ground, right? Like I'm like, hey, why don't we just see how the dynamic kickoff works? It looks like there shouldn't be any harder hits than you would get in any other part of the game. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. My turn. This one is, I only dislike it because of the wording, but I like the general topic. The principle of non-intervention does more harm than good. So, one, I don't like that it's a double negative. Non-intervention does more harm than good, and I'm on the affirmative side, so I have to like remember that for a second to make sure I understand which position I'm actually fighting. But then it is the principle of. So that means we're only talking deontology. We're not talking like what intervention looks like when it is enacted, and like historical examples of. We're just talking about the principle, and I don't like those debates. I think that's because I think like you can kind of endlessly argue principles without much interaction with reality, and that is frustrating to me. Like I think that is a more fun debate had over drinks than in a round where there is like a defined winner and loser.
Okay.
So if I find myself forced to be or I guess you can go first, being the triple negative of this. If you're on the negative of non-intervention being harmful,
does not do more harm than good. Does not do. So like that principle calls into question whether or not it's the application of non-intervention.
I think it means no, right? Like we're just straight up arguing the principle of it.
Right. Yeah, and I'd say, I think I'd like to be on the non-intervention side. I kind of like the arguments. I'm like, no, non-intervention is a good thing. Is the position that
keep out of other people's stuff.
Yeah, and so it would be along the lines of like, there's like, if you think that violence is going to prevent more violence, I think that's, I don't know. Like, I don't think that works. Yeah, it doesn't really work. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, and I think that you could call into question damn near any example that you might use to argue the otherwise.
I think because it is the principle, not the application or like historical examples of intervention, I think I actually do get a little bit of an advantage there, because I think it's it is definitely easier to argue philosophically. It is the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak, or like, of those with the capability to, help those that can't help themselves, kind of thing. So example, like I still have to end up getting into examples, but I would be able to keep it theoretical. Like, so when Russia does a bunch of stuff to formerly Eastern Bloc nations to try and reintegrate them, it is the responsibility of other strong countries to help those that Russia is bowling over. So like when intervention, like when bullying happens, it's the responsibility of other strong folks to protect the weaker folks, or the folks that are less capable of defending themselves.
And so I think I might have even had it backwards a second ago.
No, you had it right. Like you said, like violence does not help. I'm like, nah, it's the responsibility of the strong to like stand up for what they can.
But that's the
get to like rally off that like Bush era like ideology pretty strong through the round without ever interacting with examples.
You can make it the argument would be like the principle of non-intervention is the reason we don't get involved. That's bad. We should get rid of the principle of non-intervention, and we should intervene, right?
That's what I would be arguing. Yeah. And like, I think I can say the principle of non-intervention is like what let certain conflicts get bad enough to where they were messy by the time that, like, intervention did happen. So maybe that's where I can jump over it and get into actual examples, because I really don't like the purely theoretical rounds, but I can be like, World War II got way worse than it would have had the U.S. just intervened earlier. Like, if the U.S. would have, ponied up soldiers initially, maybe they could have stopped before Poland fell or something like that. Like, we wouldn't have to retake France. It would have been like, stopping someone before they gained momentum or something like that.
Yeah, and it gives me almost like infinite ground to say, no, that wasn't non-intervention that resulted in that. It was racism, right? Like,
sure.
like when we're like, if we're talking about like, why didn't we get involved in Rwanda or the Congo or like all those, it's like, but all of a sudden the Ukraine happens and we're like intervening. It's like, maybe that's not really a principle of non-intervention, but that principle is what we're using in place of it in order to hide these other things.
That's a really good response. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, the principle of non-intervention. Oh man, that does. You know what? It's almost like you could turn that back. The way that I phrased that just there is the affirmative turning that critique back on itself. Where it's kind of like, no, it's the principle of non-intervention that is used in that way, and it so not only does it doesn't mean that we don't intervene when we should, but it also works as a way of covering up the true motivations, which are way worse.
Much more nefarious. Like, it's used as a very convenient crutch and like shroud over very, very entrenched racism. Like, no, we're not going to help out, these folks. We're going to help these folks instead.
Oh man.
I think from a critical standpoint, I think that's a much more interesting round for sure.
Right. Like, a lot of rounds are a lot of rounds that are kind of fuzzy around the edges are a lot better if the debaters agree to be critical. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just a better way to go, because the tactic of just saying, it's like, all right, let's just come out with, an uber specific policy case and just, win on impacts. It doesn't really, I don't know, doesn't really fulfill the sort of public debate, in my opinion. It's like that's really obscure, like, let's try to, okay. All right. Hey, that means that this is the topic here. Prioritizing privatization. I got to make sure I'm understanding this right, because that last topic, my brain like flipped like 3 or 4 times.
Well, because you had a quadruple negative where I only had a triple negative.
And so like, I'm like, wait, what side am I on again? All right. So prioritizing the privatization of space exploration. See, look, it's still a little fuzzy.
Would do. So I don't like the like mushiness of prioritizing and would do, but then more harm than good. So that means I, as the affirmative, believe that we should not prioritize privatization of space exploration.
That's right. Prioritizing would do more harm than good. Prioritizing the privatization of space exploration. Prioritizing the privatization.
So I don't like the prioritizing, because I think that it's like, we can just leave it at privatization of space exploration would do more harm than good. But like, what does it mean to prioritize it? That means that like the United States defunds NASA is like what I see the policy being, right? Like that, or increases subsidies for private space, probably pulling from NASA budgets. Like, I think that would be like the most topical resolution, or most topical plan text would be cut NASA funding, increase subsidies for private space ventures.
Yeah, well, I mean, like,
or grants or whatever.
But it would do more harm than good. I guess that's kind of like prioritizing the privatization of space.
I'm saying like what I would be arguing is that type of policy would be more harmful.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm like, well, you could prioritize the privatization of space without defunding NASA.
Is it like a priority though?
Huh?
I mean, I think I would argue, like, in order to be topical, priority means that there are two things in conflict and that one of them receives preference over the other. That is the definition of priority. And thus, we can't have space, like private space and public, like, and NASA be equally important, because then neither is a priority.
Yeah, but that could, right. so you talk about limited resources, but you're framing it in a way that's like, well, then one side has to get everything and the other has to get nothing. It's like, no, you can give one side more and the other side less.
Well, that's what I said. Cut NASA. Like when I say cut NASA budgets, I don't mean zero it out. I mean a cut can be lots of things, and increase subsidies for it is still prioritization. So my argument would be to actually get into what it looks like. There is a greater incentive for private space agencies to be more efficient, right? Like to use dollars and not be wasteful with those dollars. However, I think that their motivations are purely still capital in goal versus like human. So if we can accomplish something, but that thing like that would save a lot of people. So a good example is in low Earth orbit, so floating around the Earth like in the International Space Station, 3D printing enables us to do some incredible things. So like we can print lungs, we can 3D print lungs in functionally zero gravity.
Right.
That can't be done on Earth. That requires a huge amount of money to do that. Maybe there's a lot of financial payoff to a private company that can 3D print lungs, but maybe not. And if it is not super profitable, private space isn't going to do something like that. Versus NASA would be like, that's a really worthwhile venture. We should explore that. That's a very cool thing. Or various like other medical research or bio development. So like growing things in space. Like if there is not a huge profit on the other side, private space probably won't do it. That's my biggest argument why they shouldn't be the ones getting greater priority.
Yeah, prioritizing would do more harm than good. And so like you're saying that my argument would therefore be that prioritizing privatization of space exploration would have no effect on whether or not we print 3D lungs in space. Like I could, like, I'm like, if we prioritize space exploration, that all that other stuff will be just fine. That would be an argument I can make, right?
Yeah, I think space exploration. I think the spirit of exploration, though, is very much flavored by the intention that sets it out, right? Like Columbus's, folks going out to explore didn't have particularly savory things on their mind, and they went and did the worst kinds of things when they landed, right? Like conquistadors were explorers, and they were the worst sort of explorers. Alternatively, like Magellan, I don't know, I'm probably getting out of my history depths here, but like Magellan didn't nearly do hardly as much pillaging and murdering as Columbus, because their intent was exploration and like mapping things versus how do we get more resources, which is what the Spanish were funding with Columbus. So I think like the intention behind exploration ends up leading to what you get on the other side.
Yeah, or like if I'm on the negative, it seems like I can make the argument that it would be good for NASA to decrease its budget for space exploration in order to reallocate that towards like research.
So now we're splitting hairs on like the definition of space exploration.
Yeah, I mean, like when you like Magellan and people like that, they weren't medical doctors. They weren't doing medical research. You know what I mean? The explorers weren't. They were just trying to find new stuff, whatever it may be. Right now, somebody who's printing a 3D lung, you've given me like a really good example of what NASA should be spending its money on, rather than just trying to go to new places. I
think I would probably define exploration broader. So like we're not just like intergalactic cartographers. Like we're not just trying to see what's there. I think space exploration I would probably define as like the exploration of science outside of the exosphere, right? Like whatever we're able to find. So like how do I mean in that 3D lung printing would fall under the umbrella of space exploration. Like what is possible outside of our atmosphere?
Yeah. Okay. So like they could like grow, or the people are working on just growing organs, some of them that don't need the zero gravity factor. Right. And so like if somebody just grew a kidney, if they have those capabilities in a lab tomorrow, we wouldn't call them an explorer though, right?
I would say they're a scientific researcher.
Yeah. So, but we like, so the term explorer, like, it's I think we're gonna have a lot to discuss about what the hell that means,
It's like
right?
space
But,
research versus space exploration.
huh? Well, I mean, like, using space for what are those called? Like state interests, to fulfill state interests.
Mhm.
I think would be under the purview of NASA. One of the state interests should be healthcare.
Okay.
Yeah,
So yeah,
NASA should be an arm of the government that has capabilities of getting into space and like monitoring space and stuff like that. But when it comes to space exploration, let's stop colonizing.
ooh, I just thought so. Good argument on the negative side there. Like as soon as it is the state that is about exploration, the like almost inevitability of military expansion in space. So
Yeah,
like more spy satellites and shit at best, but like ICBMs and stuff at worst. Like that's not private industry that's doing that. That is only public. That is what is Trump's Space Force, right? Like
right.
that is public space exploration. So yeah, all right, those are probably pretty good arguments on the negative side.
Yeah, yeah. And it comes into like leveraging the word exploration, what the many things it could mean. You know what I mean? But not. You know what? It's even more interesting than that. It's the many things it can't mean or it should not mean. Right? That's what I'm arguing. It's like space exploration shouldn't be everything that happens in space. We don't use the term exploration that way anywhere else.
I think like exploratory medicine is used as a term.
Yeah. Like there's overlap for sure.
So like I think I would, for the sake of like keeping the round open, I would probably still try and define exploration as broadly as possible and say like it just increases your ground too. Like developing lossless fiber optics, right? Like that's like supposedly like one of the biggest frontiers of space. Like in zero gravity, you can print fiber optic cables that lose no data, basically, and that would like 10x how the internet functions, right? Like think of the benefits. That is like massive commercial application, and therefore is probably what would happen if we just said privatize, space exploration, go nuts, still using my same like R&D equals exploration definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I think the weak part of my argument so far is that I have not given a very specific definition of exploration, and I would definitely be spending some time looking that up.
Yeah, I think I would actually honestly be hard pressed to end up defining what harm specifically, not like what opportunity cost, but what the actual harm would be of more private space exploration. Because so far I'm just thinking of like, well, too much resource spent here, not enough spent here. So at worst, I'm basically only at like opportunity cost and not like actual harms. Versus the like, Space Force argument is like legitimate harm.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I really like these topics.
Okay. That's not a bad. It could be a pretty good debate, considering like we only spent 10 minutes on it, and there was a lot of things that came up. Yeah. All right. Well, we will be back talking about IPDA related stuff. We'll have deep dives into stuff. We'll do international topics, more of these topic selections, things like that. Okay. We are Tim and Jared for Debate Sensei. We'll see you in the future.